Hey guys, my name is Eric Vento. This is another podcast of Government to Private. We have Justin Jackson here with us today. Justin transitioned from the Atlanta Police Department into corporate security. And today we're going to be talking about his journey and his transition out, what worked well for him, what didn't go so well, what he wishes he would have known, and any advice that he has for people who are in the transition process, but also considering something similar. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. Justin, thank you so much for volunteering to be with us today.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to giving whatever insights I've gleaned over the years to help out the next guy and girl that's looking to make the same jump.
Absolutely. And I think what we'll find out and what you already know is that everyone has their own unique journey. And as much as we think that, well, I'm no one special, I didn't have like all of this stuff happen, that, every single thing that is a part of your background could potentially help someone else. And, as long as we go into it from that perspective, I think we see really, really great stuff come out of it. So why don't we start with your career? Why don't you tell us a little bit about, your career in law enforcement and what you did and, what you're proud of. And then kind of at the end of that, start, merging that transition aspect and how you knew you were ready to get out.
It sounds good. I guess starting off with, you can't talk about the career without the origin story. So they say my journey with law enforcement began in my undergrad years. I was one day doing some homework studying, and I believe it was either A&E or I believe it's A&E had a TV show called Manhunters, where it documented the U.S. Marshal Service and them going around New York, New Jersey, serving warrants. And I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, you know what, that's pretty cool. I am a political science major at the time, and I wanted to either, I was going to go to law school or I was going to go to law enforcement. And honestly, I was going to let the internship that I applied for one at the Georgia legislature, and then one with the Northern District of Georgia with their U.S. Marshals there. And so I ended up getting pegged by the U.S. Marshal Service to work in the Northern District of Georgia, and got just a front row seat to everything that would transpire in my career. Unfortunately, there was a hiring freeze. Naturally, the year I get, asked to be an intern, that they don't hire their interns. And some of the best advice I got was, hey, if you're trying to go federal, if you're trying to come back here, the best thing you can do, I believe the words were, you could get 10 years worth of experience in 2 years if you go to APD, if you go to Atlanta Police Department. Naturally, I wasn't necessarily thinking that, maybe I had my nose up in the air because I just wanted to go federal, had to go federal. But I'm not hard to please. And if this was the only way, I definitely wanted to take advantage of it. I'm born and raised Atlantan. I'm born in the Southwest Atlanta area. We call it the SWATs. But in APS graduate, all the things. I went to Atlanta Public Schools, Mays High School, Georgia State University, and further to Atlanta Police. And from there, that's when it all kind of took off. My dad is a retired firefighter for 30 years in Gwinnett County in Georgia. And he retired as a captain. He said, hey, the first thing you need to do if you're going to do this policing thing is take your training seriously. I took that advice to heart because, I could tell in his eyes that he knew like your life could be on the line at some point, and that training is going to be very valuable. And it was. So I took my training seriously, made it through the academy. I was top shot in my class, number 2 in the fitness test. And I just got all the knowledge that I could at the time, did some training and field training. I actually got lucky and was sent to a crime suppression unit instead of just the beat. I was able to get a bunch of experience with the gang interdiction, narcotics, and a lot of the violent crimes in the area, operating in Zone 6 of Atlanta. And that's the East Atlanta neighborhoods, if you're familiar, along the Boulevard corridor. From there, I was hooked on that lifestyle, that type of policing. Community-oriented policing comes with every good officer or every decent officer, really. That stuff comes along, but there's just some things you can't learn unless you're immersed in it. And from day one, like knowing what crack cocaine looks like, I guess I was very green at the time. I was like, wow, they sell crack in Atlanta. I can't believe it. You can get in a foot chase here. People fight the police here. I have to tase this person. Wow. I learned all of that within like my first month of field training. And it was just an eye-opening experience. By the time I got on the streets and started answering 911 calls or single cars and riding around myself on morning watch, I had a good handle on what things look like when they escalate. So the more less strenuous calls are very easy. Car accidents, easy. I don't have to worry about anything like, not too much. But fortunately for me, I was picked back up on the team that I actually did field training on pretty quickly within about, I don't know, 6 months. Because I made a relationship with them and I did a lot of work during the morning watch hours. I think we were working 10s at the time. So 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And so I just made some noise as much as I could on the radio. They ended up, my teammates say, Axon Jackson. And it's like, oh, don't call K9, call Jackson because he could smell dope in anybody's car. So that was very easy for me. Fast forward to working on the crime suppression unit in Boulevard, really honing those skills and identifying, how to make investigations, how to build cases on, gang activity in the area, the different factions that exist within Atlanta, and start catering my skills, like working my brain on one end and doing the tactics on another end. So we're like giving a holistic product to the citizens of East Atlanta. We were able to take all the high risk training that I needed, high risk warrant service course. In Atlanta, I joined a team called the Tactical Field Operators, which there was a big need for some type of gap to be bridged between the barricaded gunman hostage situation, active shooter situations that go on in the city. From that time an incident rises to the time SWAT is actually calls and everybody, looks at their phones, gets their clothes on and drives to whatever location. There actually needed to be people with, long guns ready to go to be that hasty team, to be that special reaction team. And so I joined that team, had a good time, got a lot of good training. That's where I learned a bunch of TCCC, tactical medicine, all that stuff. And I just took off from there. From there, I was just hooked. I tried to continue to make it to the feds. I did get offered by Homeland Security, HSI, back in 2018. However, a young man, newly married man, I had my wife told me she was pregnant at the same time. So I decided not to be at FLETC during the birth of my son because, I'm a family guy. I was raised with family, and those that do it, I'm not knocking it because it takes a special commitment to do that. But for me, I wanted to be with, my wife and make sure we had the village around us, being homegrown in Atlanta, to have, my village surrounding us to be able to help us with our newborn baby. So that's kind of my experience with APD. I used, the officer version of APD. After I had my son, I went back to school, got my master's of public administration from the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies, where I was a Rick Anderson scholar, working all those hours and doing all the investigations and having fun with the newborn. There's still room to grow in terms of what you can put into your mind and actually stressing yourself or stretching rather, seeing how far you can go with, the academics. So I did that. A little bit after that, I made detective and started investigating all the non-fatal shootings in the city. So high profile cases, Lenox Mall shootings, to just the general gang violence. I've seen it all. And then 2020 happened, then 2020 came, COVID, the riots, Y'all might be familiar with Atlanta's Blue Flu. That happened. I can completely verify all of the things that happened there. It happened. The city kind of hung us out to dry. The elected officials kind of overstepping their powers and was kind of saying things they didn't really have any experience or knowledge to really make big decisions on. That they did it anyway. They kind of doubled down on it, and pretty much everybody that was in power at the time is no longer in power, so it didn't quite work out. But I was one of the ones that exited at that time because my wife was pregnant with baby number 2, and she asked me, Justin, like, look, you have your master's now. I think you have more prospects that you give yourself credit for. What can we do? From there, everybody has an extra job. I leveraged my, extra job or off-duty work, part-time work that you do outside of policing. I leveraged my relationship with the school, a private school that I've been managing the security for I believe 3 years prior. I said, hey, do y'all need some in-house talent because things aren't working out? You kind of see things burning right now. I'd like to reduce my exposure as I wait for my daughter to be born. And they were all for it. They needed the help inside. They wanted a holistic security program that we could build from the inside out, from every different vector. And they wanted, somebody that they were familiar to do it with. So I went to Trinity School, became their security manager, took care of every need they had there. And from there did 2.5 years of completely in-house. And then I made my transition to Visa, where I am the face of global security and safety in Atlanta and Charlotte. We do a great job there. It's a great organization. I'm happy to be there and to secure their people.
That's awesome, man. Like, obviously my daughter is in here right now and she knows that I'm not paying attention to her. So she's doing everything that she can to, get that attention, something you probably know all too well.
Oh, this is what we do it for, right? That's what we do it. That's what we do this for. It was my daughter right. Is the reason why I left APD. My wife said, hey, look, we got this girl on the way. We're not, what can we do to reduce the risk? And so it's families first, man.
So basically, when you left law enforcement, you transitioned over to the school setting based on a previously existing relationship, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And how about Visa? How did you get that opportunity? How did that come along your radar?
So with Visa, you just never truly know who you're meeting at the time you meet them. Fortunately for me, I have one of my classmates and colleagues to thank from APD for giving the recommendation. I believe at the beginning of last school year, when I was with Trinity, around August time, I'd applied externally to like Home Depot and some other places and gotten some callbacks, from, I guess, my own resumes and things like that. And Home Depot set up a couple interviews with their corporate office in Atlanta. And so I knew the Sharks were swimming. I knew I had some prospects. So it's just a matter of which one would pop at the time. I've been doing a little networking with ASIS. I went to GSX. It was hosted in Atlanta. So I made some really good connections there. But again, all of the work that I did ultimately boil down specifically to Visa in terms of just getting your foot in the door. Daniel Whitlow, he's also a member of the GSS team over at Visa. He called me, he said, hey, Jackson, I got an opportunity for you. And I don't put my name on everybody. So listen up. And so I was listening, my ears were inclined. I knew I was ready to make the jump into some more opportunities, some more responsibility, the ability to manage without, again, with what we spoke about a little earlier, is having the ability to enforce the recommendations that you're and the authority to implement the recommendations you actually make is a huge difference in security. And that's what a lot of your listeners will find is Like, you can make all the recommendations you want to. If you don't have buy-in at the executive level, then it means absolutely nothing. You might as well, the 20-page report you just wrote, you might as well use it for toilet paper. So I definitely used that relationship with Daniel to get in the door. He looked at my resume. He knew that I already had some certifications, the educational aspect, and then the tactical operations and management as well. So he knew I'd probably be a good fit for the job, not to mention being an Atlanta native. That was something specific to what Visa was looking for at the time. They're looking to tap into the talent locally and to bring jobs locally at their new office down here. And they're doing a great job of it. But again, so he reached out, let me know, hey, this opportunity is coming. I don't know when. I just want to put it on your radar. And we kind of just touch base, month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. And it's like, hey, what's happening? I do want to be on the radar. I did use that time wisely. I used the time to, comb over everything that I learned with ASIS and getting my PSP. And am I actually, using the skills that I learned? Was the PSP for nothing? Maybe, maybe not. Am I actually using it at work? Let's identify some opportunities to become a practitioner to use the skills. And so I believe reporting got way better. The systems got way better at Trinity. Different mechanisms and controls were put in place. And we had a well-oiled machine there. For a time, we implemented some programs to get some additional buy-in. If we couldn't get the executives to buy in, we can at least go out into the community with the parents and the teachers and some of the volunteers and contractors. They're like, oh yeah, this is great, and then kind of push it up from that end. So it went well. So, but I used that time while I was waiting for the opportunity to materialize to, again, hone my skills and sharpen them. So when the interview time came, I was ready to go. I knew what worked for me. I knew what didn't work for me. I know where to start. And I basically was just, I guess, ready for prime time. Sometimes say, the moment was too big. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to, some football commentaries just, sometimes the moment's too big for some people. The spotlight's too big. They're not ready to step into the role that's there. But in this situation, the preparation that I took with getting the PSP, with implementing those things, the risk assessment tools that I started to learn and use, I was able to use that to leverage all of my experience as a police officer. Because some people think you could just be a police officer and that's it. I was a police officer, I was in the military, so I can just jump right into security management because that's what I am. We secure people, we protect, but there's an entire different element it's a different element when you're talking about management and managing processes and a program that has a lot of moving parts and components, physical security, personnel security. What are we like? Just the general organizational culture and adopting the right mindset. All of these things that have to work together to affect the program that you manage. And so you can't get that from directing traffic, unfortunately, on Peachtree and 10. You can't do that from the car accidents report or even being on a crime scene. Like, yeah, we've seen some gruesome things, terrible things. How is that going to help you secure my site? If you're not able to answer that, then there's a bit of work to do. Now, I will say what a good thing, and I might be jumping ahead a bit, but one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't say is police officers, especially in the military, within the scope of the work that where they've been in places and seen things that normal civilians will never see generally. And I'm talking gruesome things, the worst than humanity type things. If you apply that correctly, if you apply that mindset correctly, like let's say for instance, I've seen a kid get shot or got shot with a shotgun or something like that, just people laying on the ground hurt, getting treated or deceased. For me, when it comes to applying that to my next step, is like, I look at the faces around me, I look at the faces that I need to work for and protect. And they're the most valuable assets. If you take that personal approach, and you don't have to be as extreme as I am, but I actually could put the faces of the people that I currently protect on the faces that I've seen in the past, and know that this is the worst case scenario. And this is something I never want to see on my site. And it will never happen as long as I do my job and do it appropriately. And so if you need anything to motivate you, use it. Use that as a motivation to keep you going, into to hone the skills, to get the education, to basically drive your programs. That's the biggest thing I would say helped me, because it kept me task-oriented, solution-oriented, what needs to get done, what's important now. As Kirby Smart would say, go Dogs, University of Georgia back-to-back national champions. That's what they, that's what's important for us. And if you can get that motivation behind you, then you can build any program. So with that, I think I probably got off topic, so you might need to guide me with another question. But that's the heart of the matter for me, at least. That's the heart of the matter, and that's something that you can take from being a police officer and apply it, if the only thing, because you do have some work to do on the skill set side, learning soft skills and actually learning how to build these programs.
No, I mean, you definitely give us a lot to go off of. And, this is meant to be a very informal conversational call. So sometimes we go down really long rabbit holes, and that's totally okay, because even if it's a rabbit hole, it still has value. We're still talking about the transition and how the corporate world differs from law enforcement. And, you brought up a lot of good points that I want to kind of circle back on. And, one of those is, I tell people all the time that, or I get questions all the time from individuals, whether they work for a 5-man patrol department or they work, as a chief of police. They're like, do my skills transfer? Do people actually want my skills? Yep. And what I tell them is, every single one of your skills transfers, every single one. The problem is, it's usually in a different language.
Correct.
And, you talked about seeing people at their worst and responding to gruesome scenes. And when people are at their worst moments, like we always get told in law enforcement, and it's a very common phrase, that we never get called to birthday parties, right. And, that's a really, really, it's kind of facetious, but it's very, very true, because, no one ever calls us for good news. We always get called for bad news. And that can enable us to become very cynical about what we do. But if you take that same mindset and you explore the private sector, then that motor vehicle traffic accident that you respond to, that's a fatality. That active shooter that you respond to, that, fight in progress at a school, whatever the case may be, all that means is now you have experience with crisis management. Yep. Now you have experience with emergency response. Yep. Now you have experience with,
incident command.
Incident command and event planning potentially. And again, there's so many different parallels to what we do in law enforcement, whether you're a patrol or you've gone up the ranks, to, whatever rank you come in at. And so some of you people are just like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, so much. There's literally, whether we're talking about corporate security as a whole, or we're talking about going outside of corporate security completely, every single thing that people have done in law enforcement is something that's really, really valued in the corporate world. And, you mentioned ASIS and the PSP and the certifications. I get a lot of questions all the time from people like, well, should I pursue this? Should I pursue that? And what I tell them is, you need to have a good idea of why you want to pursue that certification and what impact you potentially think it's going to have on your career. Because at the end of the day, experience, at least in my opinion, experience matters far more than a certification does. Experience, a certification can tell your potential employer that, hey, I've been trained from a best practices approach. Right. And, I've looked at, the industry literature and the industry documentation as in regards to physical security technology design or security risk management or corporate investigations, whatever the case may be. But a certification doesn't replace experience. And so, a lot of people, I have that conversation with, and I say, hey, every certification costs money. Every certification costs money to maintain. There's usually, actual organizational fees associated with it. It's like, so ACES, you have the international fee, you have the chapter fee, and then you have the certification fee, both upfront as well as continually. And so I always tell people, I'm like, what do you want to do? Let's start with what sounds fun to you, what sounds challenging, and then let's talk about potential certifications to get, because a lot of organizations will pay for you to get a certification when you actually get to a job, as long as you can identify or at least verbalize, hey, I have the experience for this. I've done A, B, C, and D, but again, one of the frustrating things about certifications is that they're organizationally dependent. Like when I was at Dell, they were drinking the ACES Kool-Aid, and every single person had an as-is certification. They paid for it. That's where I got my CPP. But every organization I've worked at since then could care less. Most people I found, they just want to know, can you do the job? And do you know how to find the information that will ensure that we are benchmarking with other companies and other organizations from a best practices perspective? So it's like, I think there's a lot of pressure on people to obtain certifications because, they see it on LinkedIn, they see it from so many other people, but
job posts, descriptions.
Exactly. Preferred qualifications and stuff like that. But in your case, you were able to get your PSP, and then you were able to apply it in the school environment, which made your programs that much more robust.
That's right.
And I love that example because it's just not you getting a certification trying to be more competitive,
Right.
which is fine, but you are also able to go further than that and actually improve your program's effectiveness in a school district setting. And that's ultimately that's a really cool thing to talk about. And that's a really good selling point for the efficacy of the PSP certification.
I always tell those that ask or inquire which professional organization to get a part of, which certification to get a part of. Again, interest number one, like what are your interests? What are your goals? What do you think is going to keep your attention the longest? Because some of these tests are hard and you don't want to burn your money like that. But ultimately what I found is membership to these organizations and getting the certifications, it is what you make it. It's the organization wouldn't exist if it weren't for its members. And the certifications wouldn't exist if we didn't collaborate together based on our experiences and give these best practices and look over these tests and make the questions based on what we're seeing in today's security industry at large, not just physical, but is what you make it. How much participation are you getting out of those chapter meetings? How many participation are you getting in the general community meetings? ASIS, ATAP. All of these, there's some sports professional organizations that deal with security. Like, are you getting the value that you should be getting out of it with networking, with meeting people in not just security practitioners on your same level? Do you have access to people in the C-suite? Do you have access to those that are in vice president, senior vice president, senior director chairs, instead of just the general managers or security officers that are at the front line where it's more of a drinking club? Like, are you actually gaining value from it? And so what I would suggest to anybody that joins these organizations, to make sure that if you join it, that means your membership and what the membership does for you is completely up to you. You have to be very goal-oriented and task-oriented. You need to understand what it is you're trying to get and how it can benefit you moving forward. And so don't just take it to check a box. Do not take it to check a box, because that's the quickest way to put yourself in debt, because the debt you go into paying for that test will not get paid off by some magical corporate job that materializes just because you got the PSP or you got a triple crown or anything like that. For me specifically, I became again, I went to GSX. I went to the school security hub, start meeting a bunch of professionals and talking shop with them. The law enforcement liaison community, their hub, talk shop with them. I actually had so much knowledge and insight gained from what I learned from them as I joined their steering committee, because it gave me an opportunity to give back and volunteer and to continue to drive the value that I'm speaking about. I'm trying to, get more people involved in understanding why you need these things, and how you can use your experience, and just it truly makes it a force multiplier when you think about it, to just go in there and blow somebody's socks off without really thinking about it, because you've built programs based on the knowledge you've derived from these things. So again, I'm not going to poo-poo it. Don't just do it. Do not do it if you're going to never use it, because it is a perishable skill. It is something that won't get you in the room where it happens, in the boardrooms with the C-suite. It is something that you have to take serious and implement. You use it as a tool, not as the tool. It's just one of the tools, because that experience, I tell you one thing, the experience that we get in those high stress situations on the street and in the military and all, it allows you to handle crisis way better within any private organization, because you're not getting shot at. You're not having to deal with, usually you're not getting shot at, because live in a different generation.
Who knows? Yeah.
I wouldn't have an active shooter plan as a part of our program if we lived in different organizations, different times where that happened. But it usually doesn't happen. You're not getting shot at, so you can really stop and process information and fairly quickly provide a solution if you're able to hear somebody that's just like, this has to happen now and it's urgent, and then you're like, oh, okay, let me think about it real quick. And then before you know it, you have the solution, and it comes so much quicker and it's so much more refined, because we've been through the stress of processing information in life or death situations ad nauseum in some cities, in some municipalities, and in some theaters, some campaigns, some war campaigns. Like, hey, you make decisions quick when you got to. And it's nice to not have the external stressors of your life being in jeopardy to do it. So
Amen.
Use that as an advantage for sure.
Amen. Now, I love that example of, when bullets are whizzing by, which they definitely have in the past, that sense of, here's what I need to do. This is what I need to accomplish the goal, et cetera. And you parallel that to the corporate world where, the level of urgency is far less than what it was in law enforcement. But, it gives you the opportunity to say, okay, is this truly a priority? What is actually the urgency level? And, I think that the mindset aspect that you brought up is something that we shouldn't overlook, because, skills are one thing, but mindset can carry you so far. And, your ability to critique and assess a given situation and make a plan within a reasonable timeline to address or mitigate the risk based upon your crisis management experience within law enforcement, I think is such a sought after skill in today's environments. Because, you mentioned the active shooter plans and the crisis management. A lot of companies are establishing GSOCs and global security programs, and they've never had them before because of what has happened over the past several years. They've realized that the risk can no longer be ignored, or that they weren't even planning for it in the first place. COVID taught us a lot about how, workplace violence doesn't just correspond to the actual facility where employees work. And now, it carries over into the home, and verbal harassment and sexual harassment and bullying and discrimination. So many of those were just at one time limited to the actual physical building. And now it's a global thing with the advent of remote work. And, COVID has really taught us that security is everywhere, and the limitations that once existed now really don't. And, that's been one of the biggest things that I've learned, over the years is, with the rise of remote work, how has the employer's duty of care towards the employee changed?
Right.
And I think, the mindset is a big part of that, you know? So, you keep talking about GSX Atlanta. I was there during GSX Atlanta. I stayed right down the street in one of the hotels, and that was a really, really fun conference. I got a lot out of that. And I'm sure we passed each other and didn't even know it,
Didn't even know it.
But, back to the certification thing really quickly before we move on. I tell people that whether or not you intend to pursue a certification, at least pursue the organizational fee, because not only do you get access to the forums, but you get access to all the documentation surrounding it as well. Like,
That's right.
ACES has all the best practices approaches, the workplace violence prevention. They're building an executive protection manual, which is like the first in the industry, which I think is fantastic. And, just being a member of ACES or ASIS or whatever we're calling it nowadays gives you the chance to network. It gives you the chance to build relationships. And ultimately, that can be what leads you into the next job. And, in your case, I think it's freaking awesome, to be quite honest, that you utilize existing relationships to transition from law enforcement to the school district, and then from the school district to visa. Like, it wasn't like you relied solely upon tailoring your resume or stuff like that. You had relationships in place at both of them. And it was because of those relationships and the quality of your work and your personality and the fact that people knew you and they trusted you, that you were offered those opportunities. And I think that shouldn't be discounted, because, I constantly recommend that people utilize their existing relationships when they're coming out of law enforcement. Yes, you should be building new ones. Yes, you should be reaching out and establishing contacts at companies that you want to work for. But the biggest force multiplier that you have are the relationships that already exist, and I think so many times we just forget about that, and it's important, as you mentioned, just to remind ourselves that, do I know anyone that I can leverage? Do I know anyone who's already at a company and they really like it there? Can I reach out to those individuals first based upon my pre-existing relationship and have a conversation? I mean, I could talk all day about this. This is awesome. What I know, obviously your transition is far from what I usually see and what I usually talk about, because a lot of the people that I help are people who don't have those pre-existing relationships, but what is, beyond what you've already talked about, what are some pieces of advice that you would give to people who are either in the transition process currently or considering a transition out of government to the corporate world?
I'd honestly say the longer I would start now. Basically, I would definitely start now. I was up against the gun. I felt like I had a timeline that needed, a deadline to face before I got out or made some type of move outside of my agency. Once you make the decision that transition could be a real thing, but you can kind of see it further in the distance, I would start now in trying to do a quick diagnostic, self-test, self-awareness check. Where are my gaps? What don't I have that my law enforcement experience has brought me? Are there opportunities that I can work within this agency now to build those skills and give me that leg up, that experience right now? Can I jump instead of, being the commander of a patrol team or some zone? Can I join the special strategy and projects division? Can we talk about the physical security infrastructure of the city? Perfect example, Atlanta has 1 million cameras on the intersections. But 1 million cameras they've integrated with I believe it's a company called Fuses, and all of the video cameras are integrated in one center, and we can see anything at any time. It helps with all the investigations or the responses right away, like, could you be on a team that decides where the next camera goes? Can you identify the hot zones in your cities where crime is happening? Can you kind of figure out any measures of deterrent that you can put in place to curb it? Because if you can and manage, I don't know, $1 million projects, you put that on your resume. You can, that's something we call it quantifying and qualifying your experience. I had the unique experience when I was with APD to sit in some council meetings where we were talking about the rate of robberies in one specific block of, I think it was Boulevard and Edgewood in Atlanta. There were just robberies after robberies after robberies on 604's beat. What can we do to increase, how can we decrease this crime rate? And what we found is, okay, they're low pressure sodium lighting bulbs that give you this orange glare on everybody. How about we update the lighting with like some high mass lighting that's LED based? Let's put the cameras that I mentioned before on these intersections to help us out. Make it a well-lit, walkable area. Hey, about let's close the streets off. Let's put bollards in this place. And just, there's so many different things you can do. And being in the room while those decisions were made and making recommendations from your perspective as a frontline officer, like, oh, this place is not lit at all. And we have plenty of people parking on these side streets to walk towards the clubs at night. Let's do something about the lighting here. Let's get some eyes on so the people at the video integration center can keep eyes on during this time of night so they can kind of keep us on the look, like, and call things out when they see it. Little things like that you can put on your resume and say, hey, I drove this because before, as we met on the process, as we implemented the process, these are the results year over year or month after month, because you have crime statistics every month anyway, every week, really. You can track all of those things so you can really, if you think about it, and I want you to be thinking about this as you decide to transition, like, there are opportunities here in my city now where I can think for the future and articulate it, why I did what I did. So I would say definitely use that to your advantage, everything around you, because you don't have locking up people and, being a community oriented police officer and, kissing babies is cool, but there are opportunities outside of that if you just open your eyes up and observe, like, what can I fix right now? Where are my hot zones? Every officer knows where it goes down in their zones and their beats. They know those problem areas. Can you do something to fix it? Can you do one thing, even if it's a shift in your patrol habits and your patrol patterns? Hey, I know that at this time, every shift, no matter what, someone gets robbed or there's a shoplifting here. Hey, modify your patrol schedule. Do things right here and now that you are in control of, as long as you're not on some 911 call. Be proactive and find those things, because it will stack up and add up. If you, hey, Lieutenant, what is this crime stats in the neighborhood? Oh, yeah, did you know that I changed my patrol pattern? I went on the radio, pulled my records, pulled my file. Not only might you get promoted for being a good officer, and they might keep you there with a pay bump, but again, you can start articulating these things for the future when it comes up, because you would have had that experience. So I say start early, identify those things quickly, so you don't have to be pressed up against the gun because, hey, AARP just sent me my first piece in the mail. So I know it's time, so I know it's time for me to go ahead and think about my transition. I got 6 months. You don't want to do it too late, because you might even find something that works seamlessly where you transition from retirement to the next thing, and it's a seamless process. So that's what I would say. And that goes for anybody. If 5 years on, 25 years on, chief of police, no matter if, it spans at every rank and every year of service. That is something that you can take away regardless. But one special nugget for those that are young, like, just because I'm 32, I'll be 33 later this year. And for the first half of my transition, I guess the first year I was completely out of APD, I was thinking to myself, like, well, I'm very young and I'm finding, like, maybe sometimes, even though I have this wealth of experience from APD, they're not listening to me because of my youth. or my perceived youth, even though I have a bunch of knowledge and subject matter expertise. Don't let that get you down, because some people just will never listen no matter what, regardless of your age, because security is something that's a function that's we're trying to pull out of the shadows even today. We're trying to put ourselves on the forefront to get everybody involved with our security programs. So don't get dejected or jaded just because, somebody might not, especially at the executive level, might not take one of your recommendations seriously. It's no shade to you. It's no, well, you shouldn't take it as such, even if you are young. It's something that you can take and just understand that this might happen. Even you're a little young, you can't say you were the chief of police or you were on the Secret Service and you managed all these different projects, even led a unit, commanded a unit. Like you have to do that at the lieutenant level with Atlanta to be a commander. And I was just a detective, but there is so much power in your experience exactly where you are, and it is enough to get you where you need to go. You don't necessarily have to do a 30-year career and retire with the big plaques and all the things. You don't have to do that. There's room out there for you if you just take it by the horns and take the initiative.
I love that advice, man. I think so many of us, we realize, or not realize, but we think, well, I don't have 30 years. Are people going to think differently of me? Or, are people going to wonder like, well, why did he leave before he's 30? Why did he leave before he's 20? When in reality, and at least in my opinion, I don't think most people care. What they care about is, what is your experience and does it correlate to my job requirements? Especially with COVID, the idea that people have to stay for a given amount of time at a certain job, I think is slowly dissipating. Before COVID, I like how all the time now we refer to things as, well, that was pre-COVID. Now it's post-COVID, and it's funny, but also it really opened our eyes as a society to a lot of the biases or unconscious biases that we all have regarding gaps in employment histories, and now I think there's a lot more, acceptance of, well, I was out for 2 years because of X. I was in the hospital. I was taking care of my mom. I was whatever. A, it's none of your business, why I was out for 2 years. But B, the only thing that you should care about is, does my experience align to your job requirements? And obviously we all want an employee who stays as long as possible. If they leave in 6 months, then man, we're out some money, and now we have to spend more money to hire someone else and all the related effects. But there's little that we can do about that. All we can do is we can make it a good hiring process. We can ensure that our culture is somewhere that people want to be. We can ensure that they're supported during the onboarding process, that they have the tools and the resources that they need to do their jobs effectively, and that they feel supported, and I mean, people are like, is that all? And I'm like, I know that's a lot, it's a lot, every company is different. And I've definitely had some pretty bad companies in the past, but once you understand, or once you have a good company that treats you the way that you think you're supposed to be treated, and that gives you that support, then you're like, okay, I want to stay with this company as long as I can, and so I really appreciate what you said, about everything. And I think a lot of people are going to identify with that, because all of our opinions are usually based upon our experiences. They're based upon the perspective that we have, either from our own experience or from experiences of those closest to us, what we've seen, et cetera. All of that drives our perspective. And I think what's important to keep in mind is that there is no one size fits all approach,
Yes.
And understanding that and seeing that through all these different podcasts will hopefully give people a really, really good window into, okay, well, I wasn't really sure, but now I know that I do have something to offer, And I'm going to take this advice and I'm going to reach out to this guy. I'm going to reach out to other people. I'm going to utilize my existing relationships, and I'm just going to dive in feet first, you know? So really, really appreciate you joining us today, Justin. You gave us a lot to think about. I'm definitely going to take some of that off to the side for myself. But before we leave for the day, is there anything else that you want to leave us with?
At the end of the day, from the police officer perspective, even military, I think we're all shepherds to a degree. We all have our flocks, our different organizations, our own families. Really, that's where it really originates. If I can't protect my own family, I definitely can't protect an organization. Use that to your advantage, take the ownership of that duty, of that role to be a shepherd. They call you sheepdog, whatever you want it to be. You take that by the horns and you grab it and you carry it and do everything it takes to define what a shepherd is. And don't just take the title of shepherd because it sounds cool or anything like that. No, really take on what being a shepherd means. Even define it for yourself based on your own personal characteristics and the traits the good Lord gave you. And by all means, take your career to the next level, because it's all in us. We wouldn't have taken the oaths we took if it wasn't already in us. We weren't doing it for a paycheck. Yeah, and we got paid. It makes a living for us, but we all did it because there's some, I don't know, innate sense of wanting to help out our fellow man, wanting to protect, wanting to serve, wanting to gain our own self-actualization by carrying out that function. So, hey, be a shepherd. Do what you got to do and have fun doing it, because it's a job that's like no other. I still get up every day excited, ready to run.
Love it, man. That's words to live by right there. And I think if you can find a job where you have that type of excitement, man, that's a blessing right there. True blessing. So, Justin, thanks again for joining us. Guys, if you're listening to this and this really hit home for you, or you're like, man, I really identify with that, we would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment on the LinkedIn post. Please message one of us or message Justin directly. I know he would love to hear the feedback from you guys if this has really impacted you or really blessed you in a certain way. So, Justin, thanks again for joining us, and really appreciate your servant's heart.
I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.